So if the question is, who do we become? Then, do we become parasites, Lambo bros, or men and women of virtue? If it is men and women of virtue, which virtues should we seek to adopt? And, this isn't the 10 commandments of Svetski. This is, I went back and I said, all right, what were the greatest civilizations? What were the cultures that preceded those civilizations? And what's upstream of culture is behavior. So what were the behaviors, what were the virtues, how did these people live? And what I found was the greatest cultures, the greatest civilizations on earth were
Aleks, that's quite the book you got there on the table between us.
Mike, thank you. Yes, it's a 3 pound, almost 3 pounds monster.
I mean, how much time do you think you spent writing that?
35 years.
Good answer. Good answer.
No, I started writing it exactly 2 years ago. So it was around.
And how much of your time has it dominated?
It was interesting. It came in sort of ebbed and flowed. So when I set out to write it around like October, November, December of 2022, I dove in and I'd wake up at 4:35 a.m. every morning and I'd just like start writing. And it was a very different book in the beginning. The book originally was, it came from a discussion I had with Eric Kaysen. We had been speaking about, both him and I were sort of fascinated by Japanese military history, the samurai period, the Tokugawa shogunate and all this sort of stuff. And we were discussing a book called Shogun, which people know as a show today on, I don't know, HBO or whatever it is. And actually did a good job with the show. But that show was based on a book written by an author called James Clavell. And he sort of transports you back to 1600s Japan, right before the Battle of Sekigahara, I think, where Ieyasu Tokugawa, who was the kind of like the leading warlord at the time, and he kind of united Japan. And it's a fascinating period of history. And the book, James Clavell's book, traces that period through what's like a historical fiction, right? So it's a fictional story, but it's like accurately historical.
Depicts what happened in history.
Exactly. So Casey and I had this awesome discussion on a podcast when I used to do my podcast, and we kind of discussed it, and we called it Bushido of Bitcoin, and we were basically making parallels between the virtues of Bushido, and for yourself or the listeners, if they don't know what Bushido means, it means way of the warrior. Kind of like the closest Western analog is chivalry. So it's kind of like a code of virtue or a moral code. And we kind of said, is there a moral code emergent in the Bitcoin space? Something that people sort of live by, low time preference, blah, blah, blah. And that was kind of like the essence of the first version of the book. So I set out to write that, and the first iteration was me looking at the Japanese Bushido. There's actually a great book written by a guy called Inatsu Nitobi in 1900. It was the first written work discussing Bushido as a concept, so kind of like put it in the mental zeitgeist, because the Bushido, unlike sort of other moral codes or religions or something like that, was never written. It was just passed down word of mouth and through action or through behavior. It wasn't like a written code.
Quick interruption with an exciting announcement for you guys. We have the Plan B conference coming to El Salvador. For those of you who have gone to the conference in Lugano in the past, you know what an amazing job they do. So I'm super excited. They're bringing it to El Salvador this year, January 30th and 31st. So we got a little promo video to show you guys, and then we'll get back to the podcast. But as you can see from the video, there's just a number of the top speakers from the space that are going to be coming to speak. We're also doing a full Spanish track, and I think this is the first time any conference has done like a full Spanish track alongside the English track. So we have 2 stages that are going to be Spanish only. We really want to focus on having an impact on Latin America, so I'm excited that they're doing that. The other thing that they're really focusing on is circular Bitcoin economies. And obviously at Bitcoin at Beach, that's what we're all about, is circular Bitcoin economy. So we have actually been very involved with helping them put on this conference, and very much encourage you guys to make it part of your schedule for this year. We have a discount code for you also. So if you put in Bitcoin Beach, you will get a discount. So make sure you get your tickets now before they go up in cost. And then also make sure you get your accommodations because it is going to be packed in El Salvador during this conference.
So anyway, I read this book and I'm starting to write and all this sort of stuff. And the first version was like something like 20,000 words. Like to give you an idea, this is 140,000 words. So it was a very different book. Set out to write that, and then that's like a bunch of time went into that, and then I kind of wasn't happy with it. So then I sort of adjusted, made a second version, made a third version, and then I brought on an editor who was someone I really respected, had a background in ancient Greek history, and was somewhat of a scholar, not a professional scholar, but somewhat of a scholar in physics and also things like Nietzsche and Spengler and all of these, random like obscure philosophers. And I was like, holy shit, because I started following him on Substack. So I invite this guy to help me edit, and then he comes back, he's like, no, you should do this, you should do this, you should do that. You should add the Japanese etymology and not only the English etymology for each virtue, this and that. So we kind of like, the book starts to expand and it gets to like 50,000 words, 60,000 words, like rewrote it. Then I wanted to write these other sections, which didn't quite fit into the thing. And 2023 was a bunch of writing. And then I thought like, we're getting close, we're up to like draft 5 now, 80,000 words. And then we did a whole review again. We're like, okay, we don't like this, we should move this here. We did a bunch more surgery. And honestly, like, it took me practically all of this year to finish it. And yeah, I basically, as many days as I could during the week, at least 3-4 days. I ended up turning my Tuesdays and Thursdays into just writing days. And I would write. And, it's broken up now into 6 parts. Like, there's a prelude, there's a origins, which is about the history of the samurai and the parallels around the world. Then there's a big chunk on the 10 virtues. Then there's a section on integration, which asks a bunch of like really difficult questions, particularly for Bitcoiners actually. Then a section on praxis, which is like, all right, we got all this shit now, so now what the fuck do we do?
Yeah.
And then the final section is called Visions of the Future, where I kind of like abstract map out what the future might look like 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now. And then I write a story, actually, my first short story, which runs for about 7,000, 8,000 words. And it looks at, it follows this character in the year 2084, 100 years from now. And it looks at how he's smuggling things basically from what are called executive states, which are like sovereign network states effectively, into the old world UN, which is this like globalist shitstorm, surveillance state and everything like that. So anyway, kind of like map out everything. So long way of saying, a lot of time, I don't know how many fucking hours went into this, at least, I don't know, maybe 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 hours, like ridiculous amount.
Did you enjoy like the process and waking up to do it? Because I know I was telling you before we started recording that probably 20 years ago, myself and 3 other guys, we wrote a book together, and I at points I enjoyed it, but I felt like I always had homework. Like there was always more you could be doing, and so even if I was having fun, I couldn't really enjoy myself because I felt like I should be writing during that period.
It was a mix. So sometimes it felt like a chore. Sometimes it was really enjoyable. The rewrite started to get a little bit old, because I was like, and I mean, you would probably appreciate this, like when you're trying to make something of quality, like the perfectionist inside you comes out and you're like, fuck, I don't like this paragraph, I've got to change this. And then sometimes with writing, it's really annoying because you've got this like really great paragraph and then you got something else here, but they don't quite connect. So then you like spend 2 or 3 days like trying to figure out how to connect it and flow it. And then you're like, fuck, I can't flow it. So I need to like put it somewhere else and I've got to connect that and everything. So it's like that meme where it's the guy in the office where he's got like everything on the wall.
Yeah,
and that's what you feel like half the time, basically.
I know sometimes I would just have to go to bed, and then you wake up the next day and it was obvious. You're like, oh, okay, that was easy. But you just spent like 2 hours trying to rearrange everything.
Totally.
Well, before we get too far in, I know a lot of our viewers will know who you are or somewhat about you, but would love for you to kind of give some backstory, your personal backstory, but also your Bitcoin history. And I know you've been involved in a lot of different things in the Bitcoin space. So kind of give us a little bit of the background before we'll dive more into the book.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Some people call me one of the busiest people in Bitcoin because I'm always doing something, right? And I don't know. I've been like that since I was a kid. I was quite strong academically speaking. I got a bunch of scholarships to university, this and that. I was one of those like people who would never attend class. I'd always like I don't know if you get in America, do you guys call it wagging school or jigging, or what do you guys call it when you don't go to class?
I don't know if there's like a.
Oh, really? In Australia,
yeah.
we call it jigging or wagging.
Okay,
So it's
okay.
like you just don't turn up.
You
right?
don't go to class. You just show up for the exams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, in Australia, if you don't show up for class, you get in trouble, right? So they call it truanting, like
okay,
the
okay.
proper thing. So I was always one of those like annoying kids, and the teachers never used to know what to do with me because
Yeah.
like I'd ace all the exams, I'd
Yeah.
ace everything, and they're like, "Fuck, I don't know if I should kill you or like, give you an award or something." So I kind of like went through school like that, and I got a scholarship, went to university. I felt like then I was surrounded by a bunch of idiots. I was like, what are these people doing here? None of them want to actually be engineers. So it was civil engineering that I went and did. And I took all my scholarship money, instead of buying books and putting myself through school, I basically gambled it all on the stock market. It was just as online broking, like E-Trade and stuff like that, had come out, and it just landed in Australia. And it was 2006, 2007. So here I am, like, I self-taught myself. I started reading articles on like what is an option, what is a warrant, how do I trade these things? I'm like buying and selling, and I turned my little $5,000 scholarship, which back then was significant. $5,000 is nothing now, but this was like, almost 20 years ago now, and I turned this $5,000 into 60, and I think I'm a genius. Like, I got my spreadsheet out, I projected forward. I'm like, at this rate, I'll be a billionaire by the time I'm 25. I was like, it's on. So fast forward about a year of this madness. Like, I'd literally be like going to a lecture, sprinting to the library, getting in there and like putting my trades on, lose money, make money, fucking lose my shit, run back to the lecture and like do something there. And we had, back then we had 100 hours per month on the internet, like as part of our university thing, because it was still, a new thing. So anyway, fast forward 6-9 months, whatever it was, and the pre-GFC tremors sort of hit. I think it was either Lehman or Bear Stearns. Someone went bust and like the markets got wiped. And I remember I was long an investment bank in Australia, which turned out they were exposed to Lehman or whoever went bust. And I was like, not just long, I was mega long. It was a week before my birthday, before my 20th birthday. And I'd traded all the way up to, I think something like 100 grand. So like it was a pretty penny.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, if this trade goes, like if it was like a triple top formation or something like that, like tea leaves, I was like, if this thing blows through here, man, I'm gonna make $1 million. I'm set. I'll be a millionaire by the time I was 20. This is the first goal. And it was August the 16th, 2007. So I think it was around that date. I just remember it was roughly a week before my birthday, and I wake up and the market is red. Like my account was like worth 10 grand or something. So I'm like 90% down. And I just remember like refreshing the page. I'm like, what the fuck happened here? Like I'd never seen like so much red on my screen. And I just like, I remember like walking around in a daze and I was like, fuck. So I like kicked a hole in the fucking kitchen. I was like, oh shit, now I need to pay for that. And one thing led to another. It was like, I kept pulling out loans and like margin calls and this and that. And basically I ended up $250,000 in debt. So I started my 20s, from behind, and I used to remember like my friends at university like complaining, oh man, I've got this $1,000 credit card bill, I'm losing my mind. I was like, here's a bill from one bank for 96,000. Here's the other one for 65. And they're like, what the fuck did you do? I'm like, don't ask. So my only way out of this was I went door knocking. So I couldn't get a job because I was some punk ass kid. And I had to drop out of university, and I went door knocking, selling pay television. And I moved into some guy's lounge room because they didn't have room in the house anymore. And I paid like $30 a week to like sleep on the fucking floor on the lounge. And in the mornings I would get up and I would just like literally read about the markets, about the economy, this and that. And this is actually how I stumbled onto gold and silver, and I became like a gold and silver bug. And I actually ended up making a bit of money out of, kind of trading my way out of the shit. But really what saved me back then was I knocked on doors like a lunatic. I would put 2 cans of tuna in each pocket, and I would only eat if I made a sale. And it was commission only. So if you didn't sell, you didn't get paid. Like I became this like monster. I didn't even know what was on the pay television. Like this is when I learned how like selling is more about communication. It's got nothing to do with the product. And that plus the little bit of money that I had left, I ended up buying gold and silver. I went long, options, warrants, everything gold and silver. And, I caught that early run up in 2010, 2011. That's where I discovered like Max Kaiser and Doug Casey and all these sort of people, Mike Maloney and everything. I became a doomer and a prepper. I was convinced the world was coming to an end. The Fed can't print forever.
That kind of comes with the gold and silver space.
Exactly, right? So I was one of these lunatics, and I do remember Max jumping up and down on a couch, yelling about Bitcoin. I was like, what the fuck is Max on about now? Like, but I ignored it. I was
Yeah.
like, fuck it. I've got my, my yellow rocks and my silver rocks, and I just stuck with that. And I ignored Bitcoin until 2015, 2016, when this, kind of like degenerate friend of mine who we used to call him Hoover because of the amount of stuff he snorted, and he mentioned Bitcoin to me again. He said, "Oh, my friend just made like $1 million out of this thing called Bitcoin." I was like, "That thing's still around." And he was like, "Yeah, man, it's like $600." I was like, "Shit!" And I just like I remember like it being like I don't know, $10,
Yeah.
$20 or something like that, and I was like, "Fucking hell!" So I went started digging, and then the rabbit hole, and I'm kind of like one of these people like, hence the book, like I get sucked into these rabbit holes, and yeah, I guess the rest is history. We can talk a little about that if you want.
Yeah. No. But I know you've done several things in the Bitcoin space, so
So that's how I ended up finding Bitcoin, and then around the same time I had a previous startup which failed. We were trying to do recruitment software where we built personalities, and we kind of matched it in a Tinder profile to employers.
Okay.
So if an employer and a candidate swipe right, they could connect. If one of them swiped left, they couldn't connect. It was a cool idea, but it's a marketplace app. Marketplace app's really hard. We didn't raise enough money.
Yeah.
I was young, inexperienced, all this sort of stuff. So I was in a bit of a sabbatical. I was looking at like 3D printing, this, that, all this sort of stuff. And at the same time, I discovered Bitcoin again, or rediscovered. And that's what led me to sort of the epiphany. And I quickly I shitcoined obviously in the beginning, as many people do. I was fucking around, this and that. And I remember starting, my trading account with, I think it was Bittrex at the time. And I started with like $5,000 in there, which was, I think, 8 Bitcoin. And after a couple of months, I had like 5 Bitcoin, but I had 12,000. And that's when it started to dawn on me. It's like, wait a minute, you got to price everything against Bitcoin,
Yeah.
not against dollars. And, I started listening to Giacomo, Tone Vase, a couple of people like that on YouTube. And I very quickly became a Bitcoin maximalist. I climbed Mount Stupid, and I realized there was nothing there, so I ran back down. And the idea was just obvious to me. I said, okay, Bitcoin is a savings instrument. People shouldn't be trading. Like, there was 1,000,001 trading apps and exchanges. I was like, people should be just saving. And the best way to save, because I had made this mistake trading all my life.
Yeah.
I used to think back and I thought, man, when I started trading, if I just like bought $10 of Amazon every week for the last 10 years, I would have been a millionaire. But no, I had to be super smart. I had to try and like big brain my way into making millions overnight. And in the end, of all of my trading wins and losses and everything like that, I'm probably like down. Maybe inflation adjusted, I'm down. Maybe like normally I'm a little bit up, right? So that's where the idea for Amber came up, was we need to build a dollar cost averaging app. And I'm pretty sure we were the first Bitcoin only DCA app in the world. I'm pretty sure. I know definitely we came before Swan, River, Relay, all sort of like the big names. Maybe someone said there was one called like Lawnmower or something, or Lawn or something like that, but that wasn't Bitcoin only. So I think I still hold that claim to fame. And yeah, it was crazy. I launched that in 2017. Late 2017, 2018, obviously, the ICO craze. People were like, so where's your token? I said, we don't need a token. I said, we make money from exchange fees. And like, people used to look at me like I had 3 heads. They're like, what do you mean? You need a token? Because there was people doing tokens for everything. I don't know if you remember. Like, it was like, I went to this conference, and it wasn't even a crypto conference. It was just a standard capital raising conference. And I had been to that one like the year before, a couple years before, when I was raising money for that recruitment business. And there was no crypto, nothing. This one, I went there, and there's like companies doing beauty lines, and they got their own token. And I'm like the only actual Bitcoin company, and we got no token. And the investors were like, what's wrong with you? But I actually ended up pulling a couple really good investors out there, because I got on stage, I gave this whole talk about how ICOs were scams. The organizer banned me from their conference because they're like, do you know how much money you lost? Half of my things, like half of our exhibitors lost money because of you. And I was like, look, that's the fucking truth. And these people came to me afterwards. They're like, thank you. They're like, we've been sitting here all day hearing these stupid pitches, and we're like, we couldn't understand how these people are making money. They're like, we don't get equity, we don't get anything. I'm like, exactly. So I got a bunch of investment out of that, and that kind of like saved us. But it was a really hard slog. It took me a year to raise our seed, and I was like living off noodles, off like like licking paint off the walls to survive. And like, we made it. We launched the app, and it started sort of slowly growing, and it became really a thing probably post 2020. And yeah, 2022, by that time, like I had been out of Australia for about 3 or 4 years. And I was kind of like, after all the lockdown stuff, looking at what happened in the country, I was like, you know what? Screw that place. I ain't going back. The team was down there. So I sort of resigned as CEO, gave it to the board and the team and everything like that to run. And it's it's taken a bit of a different trajectory now. I think Izzy's got his own vision and everything, where he wants to take it. And yeah, for me, I moved on to other things. So writing, this, that, like, I mean, I guess I could stop there for a minute, or we can go into the writing.
Yeah, no. So you basically the two kind of came hand in hand. Was it? I mean, it sounds like you always like to be doing new things. So I'm assuming that was part of the desire to move on and do something.
It was part of it, yeah. So I mean, the entire time I was actually building Amber was I was also writing, but on Medium. Like, so I mean, I'd never written professionally before, so I started writing like a blog, and the blog kind of like caught on. A couple of the articles like went viral, all this sort of stuff. And it was, I think it was 2018 that I discovered Twitter, and I joined Twitter and this kind of stuff. And what was interesting was more people actually knew me for my writing, and I guess that was a function of Amber was Australia only.
Yeah.
And I think the center of mass or the center of gravity on Twitter and Bitcoin is America, right?
Yeah.
So they would see my articles and stuff, and I started writing for Bitcoin Magazine, Zero Hedge, all this sort of stuff. And yeah, at the time I finished up with Amber, Mark Moss and I were close friends, and we decided to write.
Did you meet him through the Bitcoin space, or what was the?
Yeah, he had read one of my early articles debunking blockchain as a thing. So I was like, it's not blockchain, it's Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I'd written this whole kind of like PDF, and he had discovered that. He read, and that's what actually made him a Bitcoin maximalist.
Really?
Yeah, and he brought me on his podcast. We kind of developed a relationship, and we actually came to Salvador in July of 2021, so just before the Bitcoin legislation came into effect. And it was then that he mentioned something. We were in Zonte.
Yeah. No, I remember because I was back in the U.S. during that time, because I'd met with him before that, actually in San Clemente, and he would mention he was coming down, but that was the time we'd usually go back to the U.S. But there was a big group of you guys
Correct.
that came down.
Yeah, big group of us, Brecky, this, that, all these people. And that's when Mark actually mentioned, he's like, have you read the Communist Manifesto? And I looked at him, I said, why the hell would I do that? And he's like, it's really bad. I said, I'm sure it is. I said, why would I want to get brain damage reading this stupidity? And he said, kind of like in a passing comment, he's like, someone should really write a book that like sort of refutes that and does the opposite thing. And I don't know, that seed planted, and in January, it was January of 2022, I ring up Mark and I said, I'm coming into the US. What are you doing for the first couple of weeks of January? He said, nothing planned. I said, you want to write that book? And he said, yeah, sure. So we just booked an Airbnb, we locked ourselves in there, and we just started writing. And we had, again, no idea what it was going to be.
Yeah.
We weren't sure if it was going to be a refutation of the Communist Manifesto or what the hell. And it kind of like evolved into a standalone book, and it turned out pretty good. And we didn't know what to call it. We were going to call it the Individualist Manifesto, the Freedom Manifesto, Libertarian, like Capitalist Manifesto, all these sort of names. And we're sitting there with his wife for dinner one of the nights, and she's like, why don't you call it the Uncommunist Manifesto? And we kind of like looked at each other like, shit, that's a good name. So that became the first book, and that's sort of when I like doubled down on writing, basically. 2022, I started writing. And yeah, that was at the end of 2022, I decided to start this. And in 2023, or like just at the beginning of the year, if you remember, ChatGPT came out, and I kind of had this, like, because I'd been writing articles and all this sort of shit, Bitcoin Times, the publication, everything, and I kind of like was missing the entrepreneurial piece. I was like, man, I feel alone, like I'm writing just by myself. I need to build something again. So I went down the AI rabbit hole. So I kind of like stepped aside from the Bitcoin space for a little while and went down that path. I wanted to build agents, essentially, that would act as mentors of people that were deceased. So like Aristotle, Alexander the Great, all this sort of stuff. Turned out it was a pipe dream. Like you just can't emulate personality very well. Like, and trying to train models from scratch is like a stupidly expensive process. So the best you can do is build what's called vector stores and then get a larger language model to reference things, but it always injects its own bias and its own soy in it. So it's like really fucking bad. So anyway, that kind of didn't really work out. And then what we realized was there was enough data in the Bitcoin space to maybe build a Bitcoin language model. So we built a language model called the Spirit of Satoshi. We spent yeah, almost like 6, 7, 8 months, like fully building that, training a model from scratch. We ended up open sourcing it. We wanted to monetize it, and this is where sort of the business case, like the step one was prove we could actually build a model. Step two was see if we could monetize it, and we failed on step two because no one wanted to pay, basically. Like, because at that point, everyone was like, oh, ChatGPT is way better. You know, Bitcoin model is too niche. We thought we could maybe sell it to like Bitcoin companies as an educational assistant or something like that. We built a couple things with like Galloy and a couple other small Bitcoin companies as like an assistant.
Yeah.
But it just never, it was never going to scale. Like, we were becoming more and more of a service company that we would bill for integrations than a software company. And yeah, at the same time, I mean, I kept writing this, and that's when it was actually in Salvador last year where the idea for Satlantis hit me. And the idea came about when we were in Salvador. Wife and I were walking around, and she's a bit of a coffee connoisseur, and she's like, oh, I want to get a good coffee. And what are we doing? We're on Google, like looking for places. You know, we find a place, 4.8 stars. We go there, the coffee's shit. Like, fucking hell, how does it get 4.8 stars? Go to another place, 4.6 stars, coffee's shit. So the only way we ended up finding a good coffee place was by asking people. And we found through some networks, like a couple of really good coffee places. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be great if there was like an AI assistant that could tell you this stuff so you didn't have to go and search for it? I very quickly realized it was the wrong user experience, like it was the wrong UX UI for that. Like, it needed to be more of like a directory, like a place you go and discover these things. And the original idea, I called it Destination Bitcoin. And it was a bit like, are you familiar with Nomad List?
Yes.
Yes, so it was a bit like that. In fact, before we called it Destination Bitcoin, we were going to just literally call it Bitcoin Nomad List, and we were going to rip off what Peter Levels had done for Nomad List, but give it a Bitcoin spin and just focus on Bitcoin cities and Bitcoin locations. And then we thought, okay, well, there's actually more we can do here. We can have like lists of merchants. We can have lists of places that accept Bitcoin, lists of places that are like seed oil free and all this stuff. And kind of like evolved. And then we thought, well, what does Nomad List not have? Nomad List is basically like a dry directory that pulls everything from Numbeo. What if we inject people into it and have them give their preferences and their reviews and all this sort of stuff? And then we thought, okay, how do we validate who these people are? We thought of Twitter, but then we thought, wait a minute, Nostr is an open social graph, so why don't we do that? So we kind of like plugged Nostr, and kind of like this thing spawned, and we thought, man, this is way bigger than just Bitcoin. So we kind of got rid of the name Bitcoin, Destination Bitcoin, Bitcoin Nomadlist and everything. We went with Satlantis, which has a little bit of a Bitcoin spin, obviously the Sat, but people outside of Bitcoin don't know that, which is great. So yeah, it's become this kind of, I guess you could call it a nomad or sovereign individual super app. So we kind of like got it's almost like there's a map merchant thing in there, which is basically a blend of, imagine you had BTC Maps, Seed Oil Scout, rawmilk.com, like what is that? The farmers direct to like door and all this sort of stuff. Like, we've got this like the best list of possible merchants and everything like that in all of these key cities around the world. We've got events in there, so you can pull in everything from Meetup, or you can post an event on there. You can do all this sort of stuff. So, you know, and it's location based. You've got people, so it's almost like an element of Orange Pill app in there. You've got this like city feed, which pulls in everything from the Nostr ecosystem and anything that people are posting about. So if you find a merchant, you like them, you can review them. It pops up in the feed so people can spontaneously discover things. So it's almost like a TripAdvisor element. So we kind of like wrapped all this stuff, and there's a feed, actually, as I mentioned, on mobile and your profile and everything like that, which looks like Instagram. So it's kind of like the best of all of these apps pulled into one, for the purpose of enabling people to connect, build communities, discover new places, find things, etc. And yeah, been working on that now for a year. And honestly, for the first time in a long time. So when I discovered Bitcoin, I knew I would be dedicating my life to Bitcoin for a long time, and it's been almost 10 years. This, I feel like it's my next chapter. I think I found my ikigai, because I'm building this for me. Like, I've been to 50 countries. I've been that nomad. I've been that Bitcoiner looking for places, all this sort of stuff. I have, like, if you look at my Google Maps thing, I've got like 1,000,001 lists of all the cities I've been to, of all the best places and everything. And people are always asking me like, oh, where's the best this, where's the best, and I've got these beautifully curated lists, which I wish I could just have on like a social profile as my collections. Like, imagine like a Pinterest collections of best places, best cities, etc. So that's one of the features we've got in Satlantis, for example. So I found the thing that I know how to do, that I know the world needs, that I know can make money, and that I know that I'm good at. So like honestly, I think I found the thing that I want to dedicate the rest, like the next decade of my life to. And yeah, man, I'm super pumped. So I've kind of like gotten rid of everything else. Like I moved the Bitcoin Times, I gave that over to Knut Svanholm. I got rid of a bunch of other things that I was working on, and now it's just literally the book in a intellectual capacity and Satlantis in a professional capacity, and that's it. That's the next decade.
And so I haven't checked out the app yet. Is it available on?
Only web at the moment.
Okay.
Mobile hopefully before Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah. So the web app it's got 50 cities now. So like, for example, all the events, satellite events, everything like that in San Salvador is on the San Salvador page. So you can go there, you can RSVP.
really?
If you want to RSVP elsewhere, like you just click and it opens up the new page. You can post like merchants that you found, whatever, it pops up. So there's a bunch more features coming,
Yeah.
but yeah, like San Salvador is a pretty busy city. We were just in Buenos Aires for La BitConf, so that city was pumping. So people using it to like discover people, places, things to do, etc.
Yeah, it was fun going back to Argentina and seeing just the sense of hope that's there now with Malay. I was kind of surprised. I thought there would be more, the people would be more divided, but most people I talked to were extremely. I mean, they said things are tough now, but they had this kind of sense of like there is a future here in the country.
Yeah, I mean between Milei, Bukele, Trump, like there's been a massive shift in energy, man. I'm so like, we literally, metaphorically, psychologically, spiritually dodged the bullet, over the last and like over the last. I don't know. I mean, I think the energy really started to shift when Milei got in. I think just something around the world, like this zeitgeist started to like creep, and I think Bukele was definitely like the early. He was the
It was
progenitor
early, but you
of
didn't
that.
know if it was an outlier or if it was an omen of
Exactly.
other things to come. And so,
Exactly. And then Milei sort of like put fire on that, and now
Yeah.
with Trump, like I think the whole world's like just like, you know that meme with the car, like how it turns right like last minute. That's like
That's
that's
exactly
what we
how
just
it
did.
feels.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's almost unnerving to feel so hopeful, like in
Yeah, you're
the
like, what's gonna go
yeah,
wrong? Like
because
you're
you're
walking
like,
around.
wait,
Yeah.
this isn't how they wrote the script. I don't think
Yeah.
this is how it was supposed to end. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I mean,
So,
we've all been blackpilled. So, sorry to interrupt you there, but like we've all like, I wrote an essay the other day which got taken off Medium for whatever reason. I posted on Substack, but basically I said the name of the article was I took all the pills, and it kind of goes through how when I was young I was relatively blue pilled, and then I was like vegan pilled, this pilled, that pilled, all this sort of stuff, and I my journey of becoming orange pilled, red pilled, but sort of ultimately get black pilled just from just being gaslit
yeah,
all the time of like how fucking stupid clown world was. And I think we've all just sort of almost just become black pilled. And funny thing was around, I went back and reread draft 3 or 4 from 2023, and the tone of my voice was very like the past was better. We need to return. The present is fucking shit, and the future is like bleak. Like the energy of the book was quite like yearning for a better past. And in writing the book, in like deep diving into Nietzsche's work and all this other stuff, like man, I just found like a fury inside, like this energy, this new like vitality, hope, and all this sort of stuff. So writing this actually brought me the white pill, and man, like honestly, it's almost, I don't want to just say this to blow smoke up my ass, but the first version of the story that I mentioned to you that I wrote like a couple months back, and it predicted in there like Trump winning, the world's shifting, like the meme that I said, like turning right out of nowhere, all this stuff, and how like that became a fork in the road for civilization and kind of like bifurcated the world in many ways. And I wrote about all that stuff, and I was just like feeling so hopeful, and to see it kind of starting to materialize now, it's, as you said, it's wild. Like I have to pinch myself to be like, did this actually happen, or are we just like, did the Large Hadron Collider like put us in an alternate dimension or something like that? Some particle came out and just like fried everything. I don't fucking know what's going on. So yeah, anyway.
yeah. So, would love for you to like, you meet somebody, they ask you why they should read this book. What's your
It's a tough one. So I would say that the Bitcoin Standard was the book that I think kind of like set the stage for why Bitcoin is necessary, why Bitcoin is the best money, all this sort of stuff. So it kind of like made the case for a Bitcoin standard. in this book, I don't talk anything about like the history of money, why Bitcoin, all that shit. I don't give a shit. Like that's been done to death.
Yeah.
And, but basically every single Bitcoin book out there is essentially like a variant on the Bitcoin standard, right? History of money, blah, blah, blah. I said, all right, let's take it as a given that Bitcoin is going to win and that it is going to be the money and it's going to transform the world in a way that it establishes a new socioeconomic paradigm, because that's what you change the monetary standard, that's what you do. So the question then is, who do we become? So because the Bitcoiners are going to become the ones with great socioeconomic influence. Like if we've got all the capital,
you're already starting to see that to some extent.
You
saw
are,
that
exactly.
in the last election.
Exactly. So it's it's going to be 100 times more significant in the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
So the thing is, if we just have the capital but don't have the character, we're going to send the world to hell again, right? So the question asked, and I even made a trailer for the book, which I'm going to show at 5:30 later today. There's like a 2-minute trailer which like blow everyone's mind. But I asked the question, will we become the new parasitic class? Will we become a bunch of Lambo bros like, Richard Hart? Or will we become men and women of virtue? And it's not clear to me that just because we found Bitcoin, we become virtuous. I don't think it's that easy. Like a lot of people sort of like push this, oh, Bitcoin fixes this, Bitcoin fixes you. And I'm not convinced that that's entirely true, because I actually know more early Bitcoiners who got rich that became shitcoiners, degenerates, morons.
It does seem, especially like the early ones,
especially the early ones. So maybe there's something about the.
I don't know if it just like the wealth accrual came so fast that it just made them disillusioned with everything, or what. But
I think it's got something to do with that. I think it's got something to do with the class of sort of 2015, 16, 17 had to really work for it. Like for you to get multiple digits of Bitcoin, you like had to like really.
Sacrifice,
exactly, sacrifice,
deferred gratification.
Correct. So there's something there, but the thing is, even our generation, like we had to put all that work in. But at some point in the next 5-6 years, we're going to get extraordinarily stupidly rich in a similar way. So maybe the early guys got there in like 3 years, we might take 10 years, but it'll be sort of a similar
Same.
magnitude. Exactly. So
I've wondered that. I've wondered, like, should people only stay in the space for a certain amount of time and then just remove themselves? Because it seems like when they stay too long, they go off
they
the
get
rails.
derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So something happens. So I then asked the question. So if the question is, who do we become? Then, do we become parasites, Lambo bros, or men and women of virtue? If it is men and women of virtue, which virtues should we seek to adopt? And, this isn't the 10 commandments of Svetski. This is, I went back and I said, all right, what were the greatest civilizations? What were the cultures that preceded those civilizations? And what's upstream of culture is behavior. So what were the behaviors? What were the virtues? How did these people live? And what I found was the greatest cultures, the greatest civilizations on earth were the medieval Japanese, the Romans, Christian West, the Greeks, and as I looked into each of their cultures, what I found was they each basically had a similar code, an overlap that was so striking, particularly given the fact that these cultures existed at different times, at different ages, in completely different parts of the world. Like the one that really blew my mind was the knights of the West and the samurai of the East. Like basically the same social structure of feudalism, the same knightly class. You had chivalry, you had Bushido, you had this sort of, the knightly class established the cadence or the code of honor or the code of virtue for the rest of civilization, kind of permeated through. Because the lower classes looked up to them, and the higher classes depended on them for security. So like the warrior class was the shining light. So anyway, as I went into this, basically, I'm going off on a tangent here. I apologize.
But this is very interesting because I feel like more recently you've seen the opposite. Like it's the lower class virtues that have seeped up to the top, and so to see that in history, it's always been the opposite way.
Correct, and with that lower class shit that seeped up, we've kind of destroyed the world. We've inverted everything, right? We're living in clown world. Everything is like, we live in an age where kind of like materialism rules, right? Like, and the transcendent things like beauty, goodness, truth, all that sort of stuff is like discarded. It's like, oh, no, we don't need that. Like, we just need to, like, everything has a price tag, which I think is very dangerous. So anyway, the book is therefore about who we become on a Bitcoin standard. So it's basically a playbook for leaders and Bitcoiners of the future. And I kind of say it in this sense is, if the fiat standard requires that in order to win, you basically become a parasite, you lie, cheat, steal, you fucking find a way to bureaucrat your way into sucking from the system. A Bitcoin standard or a new socioeconomic standard built on sound money is going to require a different set of behaviors or a different set of virtues. And in my opinion, the best ones are the ones that I extracted out of the highest overlap in all of them. So you've got justice, courage, compassion, integrity, responsibility, excellence, respect, loyalty, self-control. Like that's the 10 virtues. And what's really also, this is the last thing I'll say on it, what's interesting about virtues is that they transcend belief systems. So you can have like, and this was evident, I do a lot of like anecdotal stories from the past, but there's a story in there about how Saladin, who was the greatest warrior leader of the Islamic period during the Crusades, how he was actually respected by the Christians because of the way he conducted himself during battle, during war, and even with hostages. So like he took the father of his greatest enemy at the time, and he could have easily like used him for ransom, killed him, whatever, all that sort of stuff, but he didn't. He treated him like royalty, and they fought the battle, but he gave him back in the end because it was the honorable thing to do, not just to kill his enemy's father. And he developed this respect. So the what was I talking about?
About how these things transcend, like
yes, the transcending. So they were Muslim and Christian, but they came to respect each other. So to me, that was really important. Is that people, like, I'm not telling people here what to believe. Like, if you want to be Christian, Muslim, Chinese, whatever, be whatever you want to be. But these virtues are something that we can actually agree on, and this is something that cross-culturally is like. I don't have to, like, you can't lie about courage, right? Like, you see something courageous, you feel it, like it's visceral, right? It's not like something prescribed. honesty, integrity, like responsibility, respect. These things are like visceral things that transcend culture, religion, all this sort of stuff. And to me, that's why I think I accidentally stumbled onto something that I believe is extremely powerful, not because I wanted to. Like the book, as I told you, it was going to be something completely different, and I found my way here after 2 years of digging. And I think it's honestly going to change the world. Like Ross Stevens wrote the foreword, and he told me, he was like, "This is the best book I've read," and he said it's one of the most powerful texts since the Declaration of Independence. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I was like, okay, that's a big call. But he wrote that in the forward. So like this isn't from me. This sort of book came through me somehow, and I don't know how it came through me, but here it is.
No, I'm excited to read it. You sold me. What any plans for an audio version?
Yes, I am interviewing. What's it called? Actors now, voice actors. I've got two really good ones, and the challenge now is picking who. So I've got to figure that out. But it'll be probably like January, February.
Okay.
That'll come out.
Yeah, I think especially with a book of that size, just for a lot of us, we don't have that much time that you can sit. But when you can listen to it in the car or other things while you're doing other things, it makes it a little more accessible.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. I mean, what I recommend to people is like the hardcover, just because this just looks so cool on the bookshelf.
Yeah.
And then
and I'm not a digital book person either.
Yeah.
I like to have a library. I like to have the physical copy. So I won't do digital books, but I will a lot of times buy the book, but then also listen
Exactly.
to the
I
audio.
do the same thing. Like I did that. So before I left Australia, I had this I built this beautiful bookshelf in my room. I had all these fantastic books, and like you traveling all the time, busy, this, that. So I ended up my Audible library is 500 books. So I've got everything on there, and I've got all these great books which I never opened, but they're pristine condition. They look amazing, and they make my bookshelf look great.
That's one of the hard things about El Salvador is you can't get Amazon delivered down here, and so and hauling books obviously is but I've kind of slowly a bit of time moved my book collection down here. So I love that you have plans to do that. Just in finishing up, would just be kind of curious for your take on what's happening in El Salvador, what you've seen, of your subsequent trips, and just your opinion on the trajectory of the country.
So I've been here 4 times, just before legal tender, right after, actually, just before legal tender, and to all 3 adopting Bitcoins basically. So November, and I mean, each time I come, there's more and more stuff fixed up. I mean, it can get easy for us to sort of lie to ourselves and say, oh, it's the greatest country in the world. It's not. Like there's a lot wanting, for example. Like the other day last night we were just driving back from one of the after parties, and for the love of God, it was like Stevie Wonder built the roads here. Like you kind of going around in loops and circles. You're like, what happened here? Like what? But that's what happens when socialism, communism, and all this sort of stuff destroy a country, right, over time. So Bukele is kind of starting from minus 100, and he's got to get to 0 first. So I don't envy the job that he's got to do. It's a massive job. But the important thing is not where it is right now. The important thing is that every single year that I come back, it's an order of magnitude better. I walked through the airport this time. I was like, holy shit, the whole airport's different. The passport section, all this.
Even like the processes, the time it takes to move on both ends, leaving and coming, have been cut to a fraction of what they used to be.
Yep. So this to me is extremely extreme. I've got massive respect for Bukele. In fact, there's a section in the book where I compare Bukele to Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, and kind of these this archetypical great men who come in and basically act as a father figure for their people and lead them in a different direction. And I think one of the biggest lies we've been taught in the West is that power corrupts. I don't think power corrupts. I think what power corrupts the weak, and the weak want us to think that power corrupts so that we abdicate positions of power and leave a vacuum for the parasites and the uglies to take hold, which is essentially what's happened. That's going to be the topic of my talk that I'm about to do. It is our duty as men and women of virtue, of strength, of courage, of power, to take positions of power and actually do something good. Bukele is to me the archetype of that. Lee Kuan Yew, Trump, Milei, these people realize that, hey, if we just, take the libertarian stance of, I'm not voting, I'm not political, I'm just going to like leave it and just, let everyone do whatever they want.
Yeah.
The power vacuum is going to be filled by scumbags, by parasites, by the worst kind, basically. And the kind of the framing I like to give it is the weak are ruling the world, and the definition of weak is someone who has to cheat in order to win, right? Like, you get into a boxing match, you poison the other guy's water, and you punch him in the face, and you're like, yeah, I won. It's like, well, no, you didn't win because you were better. Like, the ancient conception of winning, like the Greeks, the Romans, the Macedonians, the Japanese, the samurai did not stab in the back. They would only fight facing one because it was dishonorable to kill your enemy in that way, right? So today's leaders, the scammers of the WEF and the globalists and all this sort of stuff, they don't win because they're better people or because they're more competent or because they're more intelligent or because they're more virtuous. They win because they're close to the monetary spigot and because they built all this bureaucratic shitstorm of an apparatus so that otherwise competent people have to like trudge through the sludge and the mud to actually do anything. Every time for dumb things like, I live in Brazil, as I mentioned. For me to get the goddamn book down there, I have to pay 100% taxes, I have to pay a stupid amount in shipping, and then I have to hope that customs don't steal the fucking thing, which to me is like mind-boggling. And then you wonder, you go to Brazil and you wonder why they don't
Everything's
have
so expensive.
stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm convinced, and writing the book helped convince me, and seeing what's happening in Salvador, seeing, as you said, the hope in Argentina, seeing how the world is starting to kind of bring some hope back. I'm convinced that what's been lacking, particularly for like the last 50, maybe 50 years or longer, is that men and women of strength and courage have abdicated their positions of power and responsibility, and that's how the world is decayed. So it's actually on us to come and fix that. And that's really what I hope the book does. That's really ultimately what I want to do with Satlantis, is I want to build this network of sovereign individuals, people who want parallel systems, merchants, plans, travel, accommodation, conferences, retreats, like all of that stuff that's parallel. I want to build the infrastructure for that. And yeah, hopefully we can have Salvador act as like a beacon for what's possible in many other places.
I love it. I think that's a good note to finish up on, but I want to make sure you let people know where to find the book, where to follow you, how to download or when the apps come in, or how to access it right now. So,
So
please give your
Bushido of Bitcoin.com, and then all the links are there. You can buy it for Bitcoin, you can buy it for on Amazon. So that's for that. Satlantis.io is the website, so you can go check that out. And then, if you search for Satlantis on the mobile app, depending on when this is out, it'll be out. And then if people want to follow me, Svetski, SVETSKI.info, and that's got all my links to Substack, book, everything on there.
Okay, thank you. So I saw your writings and everything through
Exactly.
there.
All the previous stuff, the archives, Bitcoin Magazine, everything. It's like 10 million links there.
Okay. Awesome.
People will like vomit. They'll be like, "What the fuck has this guy been doing?"
Awesome. Well, hey, I'm so glad to be able to sit down and get for me, I'm getting finally a proper introduction to all the stuff that you've done. I've obviously seen you in bits and pieces and stuff, but I didn't know how it all came together. So
Thank you.
And I'm super stoked to get the book. So next time I'm back in the US, I'm gonna get a physical copy.
Thank you, my friend. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.